Today we're going to talk about whether or not you should skip enemies in Kingdom Hearts games. Now to preface, obviously in games like Kingdom Hearts Reach and Memories, or a lot of the other non-numbered titles, you have to fight enemies in order to make progress. So to make things easier today for this video, we'll just focus on the three mainline numbered Kingdom Hearts titles. So let's start with probably my personal favorite, Kingdom Hearts 1. So a common theme here is going to be that it depends on the difficulty you're playing. And with KH1, let's say that you're a first timer and you're likely going in on just standard mode, plain old standard mode, nothing too crazy. And if that's the case, I have this to say. When it comes to standard mode, you don't really need to fight every single Heartless you see. However, you shouldn't skip them all. That's not to say you couldn't get away with, let's say, skipping 80 to 90% of enemies. But see, here's the problem. If you skip them, you'll be severely underleveled. Now, this leads me to a mistake I kept making constantly for pretty much 10 out of the 15 years that I've been playing Kingdom Hearts. So back in the day, when I was playing the PS2 version, you didn't have three difficulties, beginner, standard, and proud like you had nowadays, but you only had two, and those were normal mode and expert mode. Now, it's been at least 8 years since I last played that version, but as far as I remember, normal mode was pretty much equal to standard mode, and let me tell you, I skipped pretty much 90% of enemies, and I got my ass kicked by bosses like even Guard Armor in the beginning, or Clayton was a difficult one, but the one that kicked my ass really bad and made me lose my marbles was Dragon Maleficent and of course Ansem Riku. And you had the other ones, but those two really stand out as the ones that really kicked my ass bad. And why was that? Well, I was severely underleveled. I think I remember being like not even level 40 by the time I fought Ansem Riku, and that shit, like I said, kicked my ass. It took me and my friend taking turns for over a week to kill this guy. Not even exaggerating when I say this. It took us literally over a week. And even after that, guess what? I still didn't learn my fucking lesson. Only was it about 5 years ago that I finally figured, maybe I shouldn't be playing on proud mode and skipping all the enemies like an idiot. Which leads me to talk about proud mode. Now, with standard mode, you might struggle being underleveled, but you'll eventually be able to get through the game. But with proud mode, please do yourself a favor and do not skip enemies. Like I said, you don't have to fight every single Heartless you encounter, no witnesses type shit, but do as much as you can, because trust me, your future self will be very thankful. The struggles you face on standard mode, being underleveled and whatnot, are nothing compared to doing the same thing on proud mode. And even as someone who has a lot of experience with playing proud mode, and even in situations where I'm not that underleveled, there is still bosses that have the potential to kick my ass, like the ones that I mentioned before. So to finalize, for KH1 here, if you're planning to play this game on standard mode, you can get away with being underleveled, but don't think it'll be easy, and don't take it too far, you know what I mean? But if you're a little bit underleveled, you should be fine for the most part. With proud mode, I highly recommend to fight as many enemies as you can, because it will help in the long run, and it is 110% worth it. Unless you want to torture yourself, in which case be my guest. Moving on to Kingdom Hearts 2. So KH2, I think I'll have a harder time determining it all, because I have only played KH2 on proud mode and critical mode. I never ever even completed it on standard, but from what I remember when I used to play proud mode back on the PS2, I think this was in 2014, bosses like Xigbar, Luxord, and Zaldin used to mess me up so bad just because of that stupid mistake I kept making, and that was of course being underleveled and skipping enemies. However, I do feel like with KH2, the underleveled runs were a lot more bearable and tolerable than KH1. I don't exactly know why I feel this way, but I do genuinely think that you could get away with being underleveled in KH2 a little bit more than in KH1. I feel like it could just be because of how much more mobile and kind of floaty you are in KH2 compared to 1. And with this, you'd think that with critical mode, I would say the same stuff I did about proud mode in KH1, but honestly, no. I still think that even with KH2 critical, if you're underleveled, it's still a bit more bearable than KH1 proud mode. Pretty much for the same reasons, but also in KH2 you have drive forms, and on critical mode you have limit form and whatnot, so that's a good tactic to use if you're underleveled and have to beat a boss efficiently. You also have item shortcuts, which you didn't have in KH1, and you have a lot stronger finishers. So there's a lot of things that you can use to your advantage compared to KH1 that you simply don't have there. Really quick though, go ahead and do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video if you're enjoying it right now. Also go down to the description, check out my main channel, that is where the GTA content is these days. But for KH2 as an example, let's take my experience with one of the hardest story bosses from KH2 Final Mix. critical mode. That one being the Roxas fight, and for this, I was terribly underleveled the first time I played it. I think I was around level 33 or something, and while don't get me wrong, this one took me pretty much as long as Proud Mode and some Riku, I feel like this, at least on critical, was the only fight that I genuinely suffered on in KH2, which is funny because on Proud Mode when I first played it, I suffered on other bosses that I don't think I had as much trouble with on critical, which is a little bit food for thought for you guys. But like I said, I mean, I was in the world that never was. On level 33, I was insanely underleveled for the boss fight that I was going for. That was probably the reason. Now, before you guys bring up the Lingering Will, don't even think for a second that I was not maxed the fuck out with the Ultima weapon before fighting this guy. You would have to pay me a fat, and I mean a fat stack of cash to try to beat this stupidly difficult boss on critical mode without level 99 and being maxed out, let alone being like level 40 or god forbid level 1. Yeah, no. But overall, I still stand by my opinion that KH2 underleveled is a struggle on both Proud and especially critical. I feel like it was just a bit more bearable and doable compared to Kingdom Hearts 1. However, would I recommend you skip a lot of enemies honestly with KH2 standard or Proud mode? I'll say maybe you can do it, it's not the end of the world, but with critical, I'll stick with my recommendation from KH1 Proud mode and say that you shouldn't skip enemies, and if you do, you will lose your shit. Now yeah, this may be a little bit contradicting to the stuff that I said earlier in the video, but I will also say that the Proud mode runs that I did back in the day, I did like 2 or 3 runs, and those were my first experiences with the game, so there also is that to take into consideration. And with that said, let's move on to Kingdom Hearts 3. Now here's the thing, I never beat KH3 on critical mode, I only played standard, and what I find is that compared to KH2, I sometimes feel like on KH3 standard, I do damage to enemies a lot slower, and even when you compare it to KH2 Proud mode. But back when I used to play KH3 underleveled, that was really apparent, and in all honesty, this is the game where I will say that skipping enemies on any difficulty aside from beginner is an absolute big no-no, and I do think that this game actually taught me to not skip enemies and get smarter about the whole thing. But I still had to learn it the hard way even with this game. The final battle with Xehanort was a struggle on underleveled standard, and I believe it was just as bad as KH1 and some Riku, if not even worse, since I was barely level 30, which yeah, I was severely underleveled for this. However, my dumbass in that state attempted the data battles as well. Needless to say, I did not do jack shit and they all massacred me and I gave up really quick. But with that said, let's talk critical mode. Now, like I said, this next part, take this with a giant, massive grain of salt because I don't have any experience with KH3 critical, but from what I saw on the internet and from what I kind of concluded when you compare it to standard mode, I will say this one thing. Please, for your own sake, mentally and for the sake of your controllers, do not skip enemies in KH3 critical. As always, you don't have to fight every single one. That's insane. Unless you're trying to get to level 99, but that's a different thing. But yeah, from the experiences of other people that I've seen and heard of, KH3 underleveled on critical mode is a literal torture. Hell, I myself kinda don't have the guts to try KH3 critical, but I do think that I eventually will. But let's sum this video up nice and neat. So with KH1, I think that on standard you will have problems, but an underleveled run is doable. Proud mode underleveled, you'll likely hate yourself. KH2 standard and Proud, you'll probably be fine for the most part, but don't be like severely underleveled like I was. Let's say you're level 20 in the world that never was. Yeah, that's really, really bad. In KH2 critical, you can get away with it, but not anything significant at all, especially during the last world and whatnot. If you haven't level grinded at all in your playthrough, please do so in the last world. It's your last chance before you genuinely suffer. But if I had to do any KH game underleveled on max difficulty, I would still choose KH2. In KH3, once again, underleveled standard and Proud can be challenging and you will die a bit, but it's not torture. KH3 critical underleveled, like I said, you probably hate yourself. But anyway, this was all just based on my experience and what I've seen from other people and what I learned from playing all these games over the last few years. So don't take this video as something you have to 110% follow. It's different for everyone. You might be an absolute pro who can level 1 blindfolded play through all of them compared to me who is kind of trash at all of them. But as a final thought, I will say that it's probably best for everyone to figure it all out for themselves and on their own. But to try to answer the main question of this video, should you skip enemies? I would generally say that skipping enemies in any scenario is not a good option, and it's not something I would recommend ever at all. As someone who has made this mistake countless times, I think I am more than qualified to say that. So don't be lazy, fight enemies, level grind a bit if you have tricky bosses coming up, and you should be fine. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope it helped you out. I hope you learned something new. Leave your thoughts and opinions on this topic in the comments down below. How do you play? Do you skip enemies? Do you not? Until next video stream, bye bye.